Okay, you're very welcome to the 2026 Historic Towns Initiative webinar. The idea is just to give people a sense of applications and successful projects from 2025, and then just to give some feedback and, well, not feedback, but advice on making an application for 2026. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Virginia Tean, CEO of the Heritage Council, just to give a welcome and introductory comments. And then that'll be followed by Sarah Waters, Principal Officer in the National Built Heritage Service, for some comments from the department. Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you, and good morning, Ian, and good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here again at the start of the year, welcoming people to our webinar, which provides as much information as we possibly can about the grant scheme, the Historic Towns Initiative. This scheme has been running for almost 10 years now. It's a hugely successful scheme, and as many people on the call will know, it's directed towards local authority partners to support them in protecting our vulnerable built heritage sites across Ireland. Today's webinar, I know, will be very, very informative for people, particularly people who may be new to the scheme, and it allows participants the opportunity to learn about previous successful case studies and also gives advice on the technical methods for applying for the scheme and all the provisions that are required for the delivery of a successful project. We're really proud of all the previous participants. They have become successful in securing other funds from the Heritage Council and in other sources. But moreover, their work has allowed the protection and the celebration of our important built heritage across Ireland. And I'd like to encourage everybody here to work with colleagues in the Heritage Council to apply for funding from us and indeed to secure the support of ourselves and others to protect the historic environment. Before I finish this morning, in particular, I'd like to welcome a new colleague, Sarah Waters, who is Principal Officer at the Built Heritage Unit at the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. This scheme could not operate without the support from that unit, and colleagues there provide valuable professional advice as well as the department providing the funding for the scheme. So we're delighted to welcome Sarah and continue to work with colleagues in the department. I'll hand back to Ian, and thank you all. I hope you have a worthwhile and enjoyable morning.
Thanks, Virginia. And I'll just hand over to Sarah Waters now from the National Built Heritage Service.
Thanks, Ian. And good morning, everyone. So as Virginia mentioned, my name is Sarah Waters, and I've recently joined the Heritage Division within the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage as the Principal Officer in the National Built Heritage Service. So I'm delighted to be here today to welcome you to this morning's webinar on the Historic Towns Initiative. As you're probably aware, the Historic Towns Initiative is a joint undertaking between ourselves and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage and the Heritage Council in support of the Town Centre First, which sets out a policy approach for Irish towns. The Historic Towns Initiative aims to promote the heritage-led regeneration of Ireland's historic towns. As Virginia said, the HDI has been in place for some time now, going back to 2018, and has to date supported heritage-led regeneration projects in a wide variety of towns. And I understand that today's webinar is going to feature some of those heritage-led regeneration projects from 2025, which will be of interest to local authorities who may be interested in making an application to the scheme in 2026, where I believe a total fund of 2 million capital funding is available. There is a matching element of 20%, and this is all going to be explained in the scheme details, which Ian and Amanda are going to talk you through later on. In 2026, the HDI is aimed to support projects which address residential vacancy and dereliction in town centres, the proposed reuse of historic structures, and that can act as a demonstrator for future projects. So I hope you enjoy this morning's webinar and find it very useful, and I'm sure you will. So thanks a million.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Virginia. So without further ado, we'll get started, but we better do the obligatory housekeeping. Now, the beauty of a webinar is I don't have to say anything about fire exits, but what I do need to say is, I suppose, two things. First of all, we're recording this because You would be amazed the amount of requests we get for, is it available, by people who missed it, obviously, or who want to go back on it. And then secondly, could you use the Q&A button down at the very bottom if you have any questions, and we'll try answer them as we go along. So the Q&A button, please. So the scheme 2025-2026 has two streams. Stream one is for capital conservation works, and you'll hear from Lindsay Oisin on two projects from 2025 in Lismore and Tralee, respectively, on that. But before we go there, you're going to hear about Stream 2 projects, and that's for plans. So you're going to hear about Greystones Heritage-led Regeneration Plan and Inchicore, County Dublin, as well. So our first talk then, our first presentation, is a double-hander. It's going to be Deirdre Burns from Wicklow County Council and Gavin Campbell from Studio Myco, and they're going to tell us about the Greystones Heritage-led Regeneration Plan. So I think Deirdre, you're up first. Please, can you share your slides?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So I'll just share mine now. Let me see.
Okay, we can see those.
You can see that. Is it on? Okay.
Yeah, that button in.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
Okay, so I'm delighted to be here today. Thanks for inviting me, Ian, to present on our HTI project, Retracing Greystones. I suppose the development of this project was very much a collaboration between Wicklow County Council and Greystones Town Team. Like many projects, it arose out of a few conversations, and particularly myself and Ruth Kidney from Greystones Town Team had many conversations, I suppose, about Greystones as a busy town. We'll see that in a minute. Really, and that poses lots of challenges. And so I suppose it's fair to say the HTI provided, I suppose, obviously the funding to produce a heritage-led regeneration plan, but very much was the inspiration for what we wanted to do. The more we looked back on some of the projects that have been funded, we decided this was the path for Greystones. So before we go, I suppose I just want to acknowledge Ruth and all the members of the Greystones Town Team, who very much our local partners on this, and great support. And also my colleagues in the Town Regeneration Office, Rory O'Hanlon and Stephen Clark, and also all the staff at Greystones MD and the local reps. So it's very much a collaboration. And you'll hear from Gavin in a minute, and we're very indebted to Studio Myco for all their excellent work on this. So I suppose just to introduce Greystones for those maybe who don't know it, it's a coastal town in the north of the county. It's located about 25 to 30 kilometres from Dublin. The coast is very much part of its character. We'll see that, and even in its whole history. And it's long a popular day trip destination, and also, of course, it's a commuter town. It's experienced rapid growth in the last 20 years. If you look at the stats there, it had just under 12,000 population in 2002, and then that almost doubled to 22,000 in 2022. So that obviously posed a lot of challenges. The Grey Plus is a very vibrant and active community. Testament to that is the community winning the LiveCom Awards not once but twice, in 2008 and 2021, as the most livable community in the world. It was an international competition, and it's kind of a testament to how the community works together. They have a well-established Greystones Town Team, and they have produced a public realm plan back in 2020, which was great background for this project. A little bit of brief history of Greystones, and this is taken directly from the plan, so thank you, Gavin, for this. So I suppose there was a medieval settlement in 13th century just north of the town, but Greystones as a town really only got its first mention in about the 18th century, when it was mentioned as being a small fishing village. So it was really the important thing here, I suppose, was in the mid-19th century, the arrival of the railway that really transformed the town of Greystones. And that has formed, I suppose, a key part of its history ever since. The railway station really forms the centre of the town and part of the historic core of the town. I suppose the result of the arrival of the train station in 1854 was that the town developed north of there were two main landowners, the Latouches and the Hawkins Whitshed family. And to the north of the train station, that's Church Road, which is one of the subjects of our project that we'll be talking about. That was laid out as a tree-lined avenue, and all plots were laid out along it. And then south of there, we had significantly the laying out of the Burnaby estate, which is reputedly Ireland's first housing estate, with very distinctive in its own right as a piece of heritage, with its very distinctive wide plots, grid layout, and gardens and parkland. So it's very important. Of course, tourism was also vitally important. And at one stage, there was up to 5 hotels in the town. That picture there is of the Grand Hotel, or people might know it as the later years as the Latouche Hotel, now in residential use. And then I suppose another significant milestone in the development of the town was really the development in 2013 of the replacement of the old harbour with a modern marina that takes 250 berths and has a huge development, mixed development associated with it. So this kind of explosion has happened in the town in that past century and a half. So I suppose our project aims to address the challenges posed by the rapidly growing population, and particularly on its 19th century historic core. So we focused on 2 areas. Church Road, as I mentioned earlier, as this area from the train station, which is in the bottom right of that picture there, is formed a spine. It's basically the high street, or the main street of the town. As part, you can see the picture in the bottom left there is just a little picture. We'll see lots more pictures of it now in Gavin's presentation, but it is part of COVID measures in 2020. The council piloted the installation of temporary measures to expand the public pavement, create more greenery, encourage outdoor dining and seating, and reduce the car thoroughfare. And I suppose 5 years later, that work it looks as a little bit temporary in nature, and we're very keen that the next stage is that will be made permanent. And also significantly, I suppose, Greystones is one of the towns selected for the Pathfinder scheme, which is an active travel scheme. So there will be investment in more of these measures. And we were keen as part of our plan to influence how the Pathfinder gets rolled out. You might hear some background there. I'm afraid there's some building works going on in the building. I'll try and work over that. The second area we looked at was Latouche Car Park. You can see here's a car park just behind the train station beside the coast. Originally, that was part of the railway infrastructure. That was a turntable for trains. And at the moment, it's sitting as a car park. So we wanted to see what the viability of repurposing that for a different type of use. So that was part of the plan. I'll just run through briefly the process of the plan. Around this time last year, we were busily working on our application with Greystones town team were very helpful in all of that. The tender process, when we got our funding, the tender process issued in May. Studio Myco were appointed in June. We had our kick-off meeting in July and a walk around with all the stakeholders and Studio Myco in July. Our first public event was during Heritage Week, and we sort of piggybacked with the picnic in the park, an annual event in Greystones for Heritage Week, and that was fabulous. By these photos, you think the sun always shone in Greystones, and it did all last summer with great turnout for that event. And I suppose that was a chance for people just to talk about what they liked about Greystones and what the opportunities for based around the town as well. we undertook retail surveys and householder surveys to get input from businesses and people who live there in Greystones. And then with many consultations, Wicklow County Council, the town team, and Irish Rail, that's in relation in particular to Latouche car park. The draft, we presented it to the town team last October and got some feedback from them, largely positive. But then we did some tweaks and amendments in December. So that's just kind of I suppose, a whistle-stop tour of our process to date. I'll hand you over to Gavin, who'll go through the nuts and bolts of the actual plans and what we came up with. Thank you.
Thanks, Deirdre. And thank you, everybody, for having me here today. 1 second. I'm just going to try and get this shared. And I think you give a great overview there, Deirdre, so I'll try not to repeat, but I may fly through some things as well. Can you see my screen okay, yeah?
Yeah.
Good. All right, so just very briefly, who Studio Myco are. So we're a team of architects, urbanists, and designers, and we typically do work on these sorts of projects that are about regenerative and creating regenerative, interconnected places for people and nature. And in this project, because of the type of project it was and the complexities, we also had some specialist support from specialist conservation architects, landscape architect, and some civil engineering and transport support. I suppose why a heritage-led plan, and I think this is actually from the Historic Towns Initiative, so I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but I think placing heritage at the forefront of the regeneration is something we're very passionate about, and ultimately tends to lead to a more appropriate response. It sort of encapsulates the local distinctiveness, community spirit, value, and traditions, and sort of balances sort of new interventions with sort of highlighting or celebrating the heritage. And I think that was quite important in Greystones, as I'll get to in a second. So yeah, the first part was Church Road, which was a streetscape enhancement scheme. So Deirdre did well to give you an overview of where the street is today. You can see the temporary planters there. And you know, it really has a vibrant and lively street, but quite busy as well. A lot of you know, sort of visual clutter, the overhead wiring, a lot of competing sort of signage and things like that. And just to give you a plan there for scale, it's about 300 meters or so that from the train station up to Latouche Place. And quite interestingly, the public realm it's kind of in two distinct parts. You know, there has been a more recent permanent upgrade around the train station, which is sort of in granite and granite sets, and it does look really, really well. And the sort of upper, say, high street of Church Road is sort of concrete block pavers, charcoals, and sort of red charcoal, or red pavers, and it is called out in the character assessment as being inappropriate. And probably something I should mention also is this is all within an architectural conservation area, so it really is the sort of spine of the town. Deirdre already kind of went through the process, but I suppose in terms of our plan for this, it was kind of in 5 parts. So there was understanding Church Road, that was from things like a heritage assessment, SWOT and site analysis, policy alignment, and reviewing of previous plans, which the public realm plan in 2020 was really important to feed into this. So it was a step from that rather than trying to undermine it. There was streetscape analysis, stakeholder engagement played a big part of it. And then as we get into the kind of, you know, the outputs, what we developed was then a design guide and set of principles, which I'll come on to. And the Church Road Reimagined piece was you know, sort of a design of sorts, really. So it really did kind of follow the town centre first and Historic Towns Initiative sort of framework for how the plan was set out. Again, Deirdre has talked about this, but what's quite interesting when we started looking at it is when you actually look at the urban morphology of the town. So that really the key piece was the railway here, that really transformed the town, and as a sort of arrival point. What tended to happen then was, the street was initially laid out as a residential street. So it's not like a typical high street in, say, a market town where it's very defined streetscape. It was a lot of sort of semi-detached and detached kind of housing. But what sort of happened was, a kind of radial development. So around the train station, you had the commercial core, which did have, smaller plot sizes, purpose-built shop fronts, and it was a small enough commercial core. You can kind of see some of them there. And as you made up your way up the street, that sort of residential typology, became a bit more apparent. And what's been kind of interesting, and like I said, just highlighted there, you can see the trees, historically kind of created a gateway, into the street. And what has sort of happened over time with that development is the high street has sort of crept up Church Road, as it's developed. So the commercial core still sort of remains intact, and you can sort of see with the plot sizes there, how that was laid out. And with that high street expansion, you have a mixture of sort of repurposing residential properties or modern development. And even by looking, I think this is the super value. You can see the sort of larger scale of some of the buildings up there. But what was interesting is you have quite a wide street because of that. What would have been front gardens has been taken away and sort of replaced with spill out cafe spaces and things like that. So it is a very interesting street. And this is the sort of thing we had done. We had sort of looked at the urban structure of the street, and what you can kind of see in the light blue there is the sort of urban islands or urban blocks. So you have a bit of a fragmented streetscape, irregular building orientations, and because they were these semi detached plots in many cases, and detached buildings, you have lots of little sort of blocks and roads and side streets that kind of break that up. And that's quite difficult and challenging in the modern day, because there's a lot of, for a pedestrian navigating the street, there's a lot of kind of intersections. So how can we kind of make it safer to get through? The wider street profile does, it does give a lot of opportunity in terms of, how can we make best use of the pavement for sort of safe movement, but also for spill out. But equally, with the removal of the trees, that wide street profile and sort of low building height, it does actually kind of encourage traffic to move a bit quicker where it can. So again, looking at how we could bring back the street trees was quite important, because creating that kind of narrowness can actually psychologically slow down the flow of traffic. Another part, so I suppose there was the public realm part of the project, and then also there was the sort of building frontages and the shop front. So this is some lovely photos that we had found from archival information and things available online of some of the old shop fronts around Church Road. And I think where it was important to kind of not just apply a general sort of shop front guide for Greystones, is because it was an old residential street, it has a number of different sort of typologies or approaches to shop fronts in the modern day. So typically there was 4 of these. So there was number 1, which was a traditional shop front. So that was purpose-built historic building. Kind of historically, in the second type was then the more modern shop front. So that is something that was, really from sort of 1950s onwards. There's some buildings that, were built with the shop front, but residential above. You then had sort of 2 different types where there was a domestic that was extended out on ground floor. And then there was the final one where, the domestic form was pretty much kept intact, but was repurposed. Camille here was quite a good approach to that. It's fairly subtle signage, but the sort of house typology was or domestic typology was maintained. And this is quite a nice, series to kind of show that evolution from sort of, you know, really just a standalone domestic house into sort of the adaptation of that house into, I suppose, the modern needs of the town today. As a, you know, the Happy Pear, quite a vibrant, you know, there is a lot going on with it, but, you know, it does add to the vibrancy of the street. So it was kind of trying to balance that. Deirdre did go through the sort of engagement process well, and it was really sort of in three parts of it. The town team were instrumental in the plan alongside Wicklow County Council. So, you know, we had that town walk, and there was a number of kind of workshops and meetings that happened. The Heritage Week was a community engagement event, and that was sort of framed as what was, what is, and what if. So we were sort of asking a wide range of people in Greystones, and got a great response, loads of different ideas early on in the project. And then the surveys were intentionally quite targeted at you know, residents or businesses that were on or adjacent to Church Road. So we had 40 business survey responses and 20 residents got back to us, and that's just, you know, some other photos of the event. You can see the boards there. You know, it was fairly interactive. We had some information boards that Deirdre showed a little bit of it with the evolution of the town, but we wanted to try and, you know, have it fun, happy. People come over and stick it on places they like, places they didn't like. And I think also importantly with Heritage, you know, it was about stories and memories, and sort of social heritage as well, was quite important to us. So sort of taking all that, and I know I have a limited amount of time, so taking all that up, we then sort of developed these themes. They were quite, you know, snappy in some ways. What we were really trying to improve was the legibility and accessibility of the town, but with it being an architectural conservation area, with heritage at the forefront of this, you know, we also wanted to kind of maintain and not compromise the character of the street, but equally the vibrancy and activity that is Greystones today. So it was trying to kind of balance and marry all of that together. And what we had kind of come up with, I can't go through all of these in great detail, but we had sort of worked up a few sections, and you can see that on the right, where we were trying to define where the carriageway was. So, you know, we basically had a design guide that ran through from carriageway and crossings, pavements, zoning, street trees, street furniture, and then into even things like wayfinding, orientation, sense of place, interpretation, right down to the kind of materiality and finishes of the street. And that was really us trying to set out, okay, where's the road, where's the pavement, how is the zoning of the pavement done? So we maintained a sort of 2.5 meter clear pavement zone, defined sort of area for cafe spill out. We had our verge then, which created a buffer to the road. With this being a regional road, I'm pretty sure regional road and the arterial spine through the town, you know, very important for the town team is also the safety and the sort of experience on the street. So that buffer zone was really important, and I believe you know, there's aspirations to try and make Greystones autism friendly. So there was lots of different things that came into play there, and the sort of output at the end, alongside that design guide and set of principles, was we had a public realm and landscape drawings, we had street sections. We had some sketches and pavement details and sort of material specification. And as Deirdre said, the aim with this plan was to go in alongside a Part 8 application that's currently being prepared. To, I suppose that Part 8 application is a bit more engineering led. This kind of allows the community's aspirations to feed into that alongside sort of town centre first approach, and sort of heritage-led regeneration. And just a couple of visuals to kind of show, you know, how that might work. You know, the street trees coming back was really trying to, suppose, provide the green spine or backbone. And between that, you can see there where the kind of key clear footpath was, and then a series of kind of street furnitures and spill out spaces. And just a little sketch to kind of show you there. The good thing with the temporary planting, in fairness, was that it almost reset the pavement line. It was temporary, but the longer that stays temporary, the more risk there is that can be taken away and park and reinstated. So we're really, and Wicklow County Council and the town team are trying to take advantage of trying to reset that line. So here it just gives you a kind of idea of how that could work. And we had a number of these kind of sketches as well, which were really helpful to kind of convey the idea. And yeah, just lastly, just alongside the public ground drawings and that, we took a case study shopfront for a shopfront enhancement scheme, and it was this building on the right, the AIB Bank. So this is directly, the view you have directly outside the train station. So it really is first impressions. And it was traditionally, there was the historic purpose-built shop front there. But the AIB Bank, as many of you will know, in terms of its design at the minute, it's the sort of plastic fascia. It isn't really relating well to the Sherry Fitzgerald on the left. The vertical articulation and things like that wasn't great. So what we had done was we, with their permission, had taken this and kind of reworked it up and looked at, okay, how could this look if we were to apply for funding, help them out with a sort of shop front enhancement. And you can see this is probably more historically how it would look. The two shop fronts would relate to each other. The signage was minimal, and even in terms of projecting signage and things like that. So that's it. And it is a bit of a whistle stop as well. I'm trying to get through the two projects, but if I have time, I'll just run through the Tush Car Park quite quickly. But this was the second part of the plan, and this was a feasibility study. And just to give you an idea of the site, zoomed in slightly more. So you can see Church Road here runs almost kind of parallel, and the railway line kind of dissects the two spaces. Now, whilst it looks very close in proximity, it is accessed via a footbridge, and there's stepped access from the sort of promenade here. So some of the things we were looking at, there was difficult. There was accessibility issues. Irish Rail site is directly below the car park. And obviously the rail runs adjacent, and a right of way had to be maintained for Irish Rail, so that provided some challenges. It's currently in use as a car park, so again, any removal of car park is quite challenging. And also we were looking at how could this space be used. So the activation and programming of it was quite important, and obviously with this being a heritage-led plan, a great starting point was the heritage of it. Now that wasn't just, there was the turntable, so there was the rail heritage, but what was quite important to us was also looking at the maritime heritage, or I suppose the proximity to the sea. So it had the sort of sea walls that kind of flanked it. So it was quite difficult to say, okay, how could we work out an accessible solution without sort of undermining the heritage. And as Deirdre said, there was the Greystone Public Realm Plan that had sort of identified this site as a town square. So that town square and public plaza was kind of the starting point. And it really is a fascinating site there. There's just some historic images to show you as the train there would come in. You can see the turntable here. That's Church Road just down to the left. So really interesting, and some great sort of photos and archival information on how this would have looked. So when we kind of discussed this with the town team and Wicklow County Council, we had sort of came up with 4 approaches in some ways. So there was these key themes of benchmarking, and these kind of went from theme 1, which was trace and texture, as how could we kind of reflect the turntable and the railway heritage, possibly more subtly with clever use of pavement and things like that, right up then to sort of rebuild and reinstatement, and there was discussions about, okay, what if we actually just got an old train back here, rebuilt the turntable, and had it as a sort of centerpiece within the square. And what we had, this is the plan that we had sort of decided upon. So it probably was more the first theme, the trace and texture, because what was also quite important here was the sort of flexibility of use of the site. So there was a previous feasibility study that had done that had a sort of permanent stage and things like that. So we felt this would be a nice response. And in some ways, this is actually almost in 2 or 3 zones. So if you can see here down to the right, we had the sort of railway square in some ways, and we had kind of through topography mapping, we could actually work out where these aspects were. So actually, there's a scan that was taken, and the railway turntable pit is still there. So we could work that out, and we had a sort of small kiosk building that would sort of help activate that space on a day-to-day basis and sort of surveillance and things like that. We have removed the car parking from the proposal, and we did feel that even allowing some cars in here would be quite difficult to maintain. So where we had went to was on the left-hand side there. This is almost an active travel spine or a little hub, where we would have bike parking, bike rental, with proximity to the railway, secure bike parking. So there's an aspiration to kind of push the active travel side of things. And then we would still maintain our access for Irish Rail. And what we had done then was a sort of graded pathway from the promenade up to the higher level. It's about 7 or 8 steps higher of the square, and that would really create better connectivity between the town centre and the promenade without interfering with the existing seawalls that are there as well. So that's me. Hopefully, Ian, that wasn't just over or maybe just over my time allocation.
That was great, Gavin, and
all right.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Deirdre, as well. Now, I did see we have one question, which I think probably more for Deirdre. What was the buy-in or input of local councillors and TDs?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of the local councillors are already members of the town team. So really, I suppose the town team was our conduit for reaching them. So I suppose generally positive. Most people are very interested in the upcoming Pathfinder scheme for church roads. That took, I suppose, most of the focus, and opinions on that about the active travel proposals. So I suppose anything that could, inform how that scheme gets rolled out was generally welcomed. Yeah.
Okay, good. So thank you. Thanks for that. So thank you, Deirdre. Thank you, Gavin. Well done. So our next speaker then is Niamh Kiernan, who is Conservation Officer in Dublin City Council. And Niamh is going to tell us about an Inchicore, County Dublin, or Dublin City, regeneration plan. Hi, Niamh.
Hello. Hi, Ian. Good morning, everyone.
Do you want to have a go at uploading your slides there using the share button?
Yes, I will. I will indeed.
Please.
Okay. Now, can you see that?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Just bear with me. I will oh.
Yeah, something has happened there.
Okay. Can you see a full slide? Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's it. Perfect.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the town, the village of Inchicore, which spreads out to the area of Kilmainham in the west of the city of Dublin. I suppose just to say we have been watching the work that's taking place around the country as part of the Historic Towns Initiative with a huge amount of interest over the last few years, and have been very impressed with the quality of conservation repairs and conservation works and public realm enhancements that have come out of that scheme. But we never realised as a city that we would be eligible for the Historic Towns Initiative until relatively recently. So after some conversations with the Heritage Officer here in DCC and the Department of Heritage in the Customs House, we realised that if we could select a project that was outside the Living City Initiative, that we could apply for the Historic Towns Initiative. So that was very exciting for us because it was the first time that we realised we could take part in this lovely scheme. So I'll talk a little bit about how the project generated, but this is really the first step towards trying to provide financial support to owners and occupiers of buildings in the area of Inchicore, Kilmainham. The objective of the plan is to understand the history of the place, to assess its cultural significance and describe its built heritage. And the site area is defined as Inchicore, Kilmainham, but it's quite nebulous. The boundary has spread through discussions with stakeholders, discussions with local area office, discussions with our own colleagues, that it's quite tight at the moment, but it probably needs to expand over time to take into account the intangible culture, the intangible significance of the area. So, but this starts putting some bones on a project that can assess the condition of the area, assess the condition of the built heritage, outlines the threats to that significance, and then sets out a conservation repair strategy, including recommendations for enhancement and repair, improved management and interpretation for the area. So the catalyst for the project it actually comes from about 2018. This is Emmet Hall. It's 122 Emmet Road. It's a significant historical building, a red brick Georgian house linked to the Irish Transport and General Workers Union and the 1913 lockout and 1916 rising figures like James Larkin and Michael Mallon. And the structure was first recognised by the NIAH as being of local significance and was subject to local calls and planning considerations for its inclusion to the record of protected structures. So in 2018, a local area councillor requested that this building be considered for addition to the record of protected structures in light of its significance, its historical significance and cultural and social significance to the place and to the history of the development of Ireland as a free state as a whole. So in 2020, during COVID, the conservation section looked at the rating, the local rating from the NIH. They looked at the significance of the building and acknowledged that while the building itself had historical significance, in its current state, it did not merit a higher regional rating on the grounds of architectural heritage protection. So recommended that a plaque be considered instead. So on that basis, we didn't proceed with the addition of the structure to the record of protected structures. But we were very conscious that because it wasn't going to become a protected structure, that it wouldn't be eligible for built heritage investment scheme grant funding at a point in the future. A few years later, a local enterprise, which is led by a now councillor actually in Dunleer at Down, Lauren Shute, she is the owner, the developer of a social enterprise called D8 Development, which brings empty properties and vacant properties back to life, concentrating on the rehabilitation of the ground floor units. And they take on projects where development has previously stalled and they create affordable spaces where people can live and work. They spent 8 weeks renovating and restoring part of this building, and works included the removal of a substandard shop fit out, the restoration of original ceilings, cleaning and restoring original brickwork, upgrading electrical and plumbing, and new panelling fit out for a meeting room and a display of artwork. And one of the units there, which is until relatively recently comic books, that was taken over as an office space for a local councillor in 2020 and then became a little bookshop by 2022. Between 2021 and 2022, the DCC Conservation Section were contacted on a number of occasions by the local community, keen to find out what form of financial assistance will be available to them to repair and upgrade their historic structures. But as so few of the historic structures in the area were protected, and because the area wasn't an architectural conservation area, it became clear that there was very little that we could do in our at that stage to support them with their endeavours. At the same time, we were attending a number of the Historic Structures, Historic Towns Initiative webinars and learning about what was happening across the country. And we were really keen to understand that if Dublin City Council could work on a project for one of our historic urban villages with the scheme. So after discussions, as I said before, with the DCC Heritage Officer Charles Duggan and the architectural advisors in the Department of Heritage in 2021, we were informed that we could apply for grant assistance for the owners of historic buildings that were not protected structures nor in an ACA through the Historic Towns Initiative, as long as the projects were not located within the boundary of the Living City Initiative. So the Conservation Section invited colleagues in the Archaeology Department, the Heritage Section, local area offices, city architects and parks to come together to discuss the potential of a number of historic urban villages across the city which could benefit from support from the Historic Towns Initiative. And we weighed the merits of each of the areas. We included a number of historic villages like Harold's Cross, Rathgar, Ranelagh, etc. And Inchicore, the area of Inchicore, weighed the highest in the minds of those who work in the area. And part of what tipped Inchicore over the edge, what gave it the edge, was the fact that there was such an active local community. There was already a Kilmainham Inchicore network who were very active in the area and very active with DCC. There were very, very active residents associations. It was the time of the Bus Connects proposals, and there was a huge amount of interest from the local community, residents associations, business groups, etc., looking to improve the public realm of the area and to improve the fortune, I suppose, if you like, of Inchicore. So we knew that if we were successful in getting a grant for Inchicore Kilmainham, we would have the support of the local community. So due to resourcing issues, we weren't actually able to continue with this project until 2025. But the first step we knew was to prepare a conservation management plan, historic landscape strategy for the area, which could then inform a future public realm enhancement scheme or conservation-led repairs of the historic buildings in this part of the city. We applied for grant funding from the Historic Towns Initiative in January 2025 for the preparation of a conservation management plan for Inchicore Kilmainham, and in summer 2025 went through a public procurement process and appointed 7L architects to prepare the conservation management plan to guide future conservation and heritage-led regeneration of Inchicore Kilmainham. We set up a steering group which consisted of internal DCC stakeholders, including representatives from the archaeology, the heritage departments and the conservation departments, the parks department, planning, city architects, local area offices, and we also invited representatives from the Kilmainham Inchicore network and residents associations who were absolutely instrumental in helping us start and helping us develop the conservation management plan. So just in terms of the significance, the cultural significance of Inchicore Kilmainham, the cultural significance of Inchicore Kilmainham stems from its location and its geology and its topography. This very particular riverine and glaciated topography is fundamental to the evolution of the built environment in the area. It is situated at high ground between the Liffey and the River Cammock on the western approaches to Dublin City, and it terminates the Esker Riada, a geographical feature consisting of raised ridges that cross the entire country from Dublin to Galway. These eskers date from the last ice age, providing passage since ancient times and were of strategic importance. And as demonstrated on the first edition OS map, the presence of eskers determined transportation routes. The ancient route to Galway follows this esker and was known as the Slieve Moor or the Great Highway. And the Emmet Roads and Tyrconnell Roads of Inchicore are aligned with the final approaches to the capital along the road to Munster and are also referred to as the Road to Naas, which was once the ancient capital of Leinster and assembly place of kings. The topography of the area also provided power for early mills, and the location at the entrance to the city along the canal made the area a significant player in Ireland's industrial development. Its history also made a locus during the Georgian expansion of the city with military barracks, jails and courthouses. This location also facilitated the Industrial Revolution as horsepower was replaced by rail and tram production, and traces of each era in industry can still be found in the upstanding fabric that remains in Inchicore and Kilmainham. Roke's map of 1757 remains the focus of much development within the balance of the terrain still laid out for agricultural use. A mill race was created at this point with likely mill buildings along the Inchicore and Tyrconnell roads. The river crossing of the Camach at Golden Bridge has been built at this point, and the future Emmett Road exists as some class of carriageway labelled Kilmainham Road. William Robinson's Royal Hospital at Kilmainham is clearly laid out with its long westerly avenue, and it is part of a significant series of important state-funded civic works built as Dublin expanded west from the 17th century into the largest available land bank at Kilmainham Manor. It involved most of the most celebrated architects of the period, and this expansion was facilitated by government ownership of land held over from the dissolution and a period of sustained stability following the Confederate Wars. And what 7L started off by doing was looking at the first edition, second edition, third edition OS maps, and they started mapping the structures that were still evident in Inchicore Kilmainham from this point. So this is the first edition. Sorry, these are the buildings that are still present, that were present on the first edition OS map. At this point, Inchicore Golden Bridge is not yet a village, but is consisted solely of the Black Lion pub with outbuildings to the rear and another terrace of labourers' cottage flanking it on Grattan Terrace. It also has Kilmainham Jail up in the top northeast corner. And then 7L looked at the structures still upstanding that are evident on the second edition OS map from the late 19th century. So by the time that this OS map was updated in 1867, all of the components of the area were established with schools, churches of various faiths, and the arrival of the Great Southern and Western Railway Line, associated railway works and workers' housing. Golden Bridge Cemetery was established by Daniel O'Connell as the first non-denominational cemetery on the island consecrated after Catholic emancipation. 7L then starts to plot the structures that are evident on the third edition OS map. So most housing over the following 60 years developed as a series of short terraces constructed in parcels along Inchicore Road, Emmett Road and Tyrconnell Roads. The largest residential developments of the area were in the 20th century with the development of the Golden Bridge estate and the first of two redevelopments of Richmond Barracks, which was converted into housing in the late 20th century. And when we start to plot all of these structures together, the protected structures, the structures that are on the NIH list, structures that are not protected but are evident on the first edition OS map, the second edition OS map, the third edition OS map, we start to get a little bit of a picture of how much of the built fabric that has developed over 150, 200 years is still upstanding, and yet very few of these buildings are actually protected structures, and the area itself isn't in an architectural conservation area. So this clearly sets out the support that can be given by the Historic Towns Initiative to support the owners of these historic buildings when they aren't actually able to obtain any grant assistance from us through the Built Heritage Investment Scheme or the Historic Structures Fund. So what was also very clear at this point was that there wasn't a specific character, if you like, of Inchicore as a whole, that it was divided into areas or streets, and that each part of Inchicore Kilmainham had a very, very different character. And so what happened then was that 7L started looking at what's actually happening on the ground. So they undertook a series of field studies where they walked the area, identifying various elements of interest in the area. They started off at the north of the site, around by the jail, Kilmainham Jail, and just as a bit of background, at the end of Inchicore Road, where the jail is now, was a location of a fairgreen which operated for over 6 centuries. William Fadden's plan of the City of Dublin notes that this area was known as Gallows Hill. The jail was built there in 1796 and the courthouse in 1820. Opposite the jail is currently the Hilton Hotel, but until 2003 this was actually the site of the Rowntree Macintosh factory. So this highlights the evolution and the ultimate decline of industrial production in the area into the 20th century. One thing that was very evident in the field study was how rich the architecture is in this part of the city, but how little is actually maybe recorded on our part. So what was really interesting to us was how the character is soft, it's quiet. You don't necessarily notice it until you start looking in detail, but it's actually quite intact. And partly we realized that one of the reasons why the boundaries, for instance, of this part of the city is so intact is due to its topography. The drop in levels between the front of some of these houses and the back of their houses is actually 6 meters, which is significant, and it's because of this very strong topography, which is due to the location of the River Cammock and the Esker. This has actually saved a lot of the front boundaries of these buildings. So in other parts of the city where we're trying to retain as much of this historic fabric, these really special railings, boundary walls, plinths, pillars, etc. In Inchicore, there hasn't been that loss to such an extent, and that's partly due to the topography of the site. I'm just looking at my time. Okay. So just talking a little bit about the development of the mansions, if you like, the higher quality mansions, villas, didn't continue through the 20th century at all. So over time, the built culture, the built heritage of the area has changed significantly into more modest terraces. But there is still evidence of the older structures, Georgian structures, higher quality structures in the buildings that have received potentially non-sympathetic shop fronts, or they've been eroded somewhat over time with development that hasn't been particularly sensitive. This is Tyrconnell Road and Street. One thing that identifies or separates, let's be like, Tyrconnell Road and Inchicore Road is its presence of trees, and that makes it different to Emmet Road, which doesn't have trees at all. And there is a sense of hostility along Emmet Road, partly due to the fact that there hasn't been a planting scheme of planes along that stretch. But Tyrconnell Road and Inchicore Road themselves are actually they're very pleasant, they're soft. The trees definitely help to reduce the hostility along the area, and these were planted very specifically in along with the development of the streets in the early 20th century. There are some very unusual structures here on Tyrconnell Road, these very unusual entrances here, the cottages with the higher up windows, and that's due to the topography of the site, that they fall quite significantly down towards the Cammock to the rear. Again, you can see the boundaries where along Inchicore Road, Tyrconnell Road, the boundaries have been protected, partly due to the fact that it's hard to get cars into them. Here you can see the significance, and you can see, actually, I wanted to show you this really lovely example of quite a recent high quality shop front. It's the photo there to the lower left hand corner, and from discussions with the area office, we know that they operate a really successful shopfront improvement scheme, and we were hoping that the funding from the Historic Towns Initiative could support owners even further and help them with maybe the upgrades to the windows and the floors above, help them with repairing Rainwood's roof and bricks, repointing of the brick finishes. So here you can see a huge wealth of historic fabric and character all across Inchicore, Kilmainham, and you often mightn't even realise that it's there, but it's only from taking the photographs and looking at these buildings in detail that you can start to see it. We're particularly interested in DCC about our 20th century architecture. This is the VEC and the library along Emmett Road, which we understand is subject of redevelopment proposals to turn into a community centre. So there is a lot going on there in the area from the 1700s right up to the 21st century. So what I do want to talk about, but not in a huge amount of detail, is actually the significance of the natural heritage. And we engaged with the biodiversity officer in the Parks Department at an early stage, because built heritage is one thing, but it doesn't it doesn't live in a vacuum, and it is that link between natural heritage and built heritage and the spaces between the buildings that gives its character. So the historic spine to the area and its most ignored resource is the Cammock River. Beyond buildings, the most obvious distinction between the main roads in Inchicore Kilmainham are those which were historically planted with trees. The 1937 OS records the extent of planting, principally with London planes, and an AECOM study of the River Cammock from 2021 confirmed the diversity of fish, flora and fauna that can be found there. So 7L worked very closely with the Parks Department, who provided a number of projects that they've been working on over the last 20 years to provide public realm enhancement strategies to open up the River Cammock to the town, and this objective aspiration has been brought to the Conservation Management Plan. Which brings me very briefly to the vulnerabilities and threats. Now, this is still a draft, it's a work in progress, but we have identified some vulnerabilities and threats to the local area and have set in plan a couple of short-term, medium-term and long-term projects that we could work with the local community on, that we could work with the city architects on, parks, etc., and then some wider projects that would be subject to, future formal projects and engagement. But there's been some investment in the public realm, such as public paving at Tyrconnell Road, but we're very conscious of the hostility along some of the streets, such as Emmett Road, partly due to the fact that it's such a wide road with no trees and is a transportation route more than anything. Recent redevelopment of Richmond Barracks will stimulate and extend the commercial core of the village towards the east. The area features numerous terraces with substantial remains of 19th and early 20th century wrought and cast iron, decorative brickwork and cut stone, but much of this historic fabric is not protected through the Record of Protected Structures nor an ACA. So this lack of statutory support and direction in terms of financial assistance and expertise is leading to the loss of some of this material and detail. Mature London plane trees characterise several streets in the area, including Tyrconnell Road, Inchicore Road and nearby South Circular Road. These were planted in the early part of the 20th century, but proposed infrastructural changes such as bus connects or other transportation interventions will create a challenge to retain this natural heritage, but it's also an opportunity to extend greening of the streets for the wider benefit of the community. And then on foot of this, 7L have come up with a conservation strategy for some future projects. Development should be viewed as an opportunity for the conservation of the built heritage of the town, and all existing protections in place will be used to support sensitive and imaginative responses to works that involve the existing natural heritage, street layouts, terraces and assemblies. What's interesting about this is that this is a historic town that's actually only growing. It's becoming more and more and more desirable to live in such close proximity to the city. It's very desirable area of the city to live, but this has associated developmental pressures. The built heritage of Kilmainham and Inchicore needs to be prioritised in this context, thereby enhancing the quality of life for residents, strengthening their connection to this valuable cultural place for the benefit of the whole community, and providing opportunities for tourism and employment in heritage. And this takes me to a first step that we have towards identifying some projects. We looked at the development plan, we looked at the the needs of the Historic Towns Initiative, and we've plotted where certain projects can hit the targets of both the development plan, policies in the development plan, and policies and objectives of the Historic Towns Initiative. And this has then been a little bit, we've worked on this a little bit, we're still working on it, towards identifying some short-term, long-term and medium projects. Projects that encourage private owners and occupiers to invest in appropriate conservation-led works and repairs. This was the first objective that we had when we first set out looking at the Historic Towns Initiative. We were looking at projects that would bring vacant floor area in historic buildings back into use, with an emphasis on proposals to bring vacant or underused floor area in historic buildings back into residential use. We're looking at projects that would address dereliction and vacancy. We would be looking at projects that encourage the conservation of landmark buildings. We'd be looking at projects that would improve maintenance and general improvements to streetscapes. We'd be looking at conservation-led public realm works, which would encourage investment from other sources. And then projects that would build resilience into the historic built environment of the town to enable it to withstand the effects of climate change. And in the short term, we've identified a few projects, and these would include the maintenance and repair of the facades of the buildings in Inchicore. We'll be looking at working with the area office to augment their existing shopfront enhancement scheme, potentially looking at supporting owners on the upper floors or of their, looking at their rainwater goods and their roofs. We'll be looking at supporting owners by encouraging them to use best conservation practice in the repair of the facades of their buildings. We'd be looking at supporting owners by the conservation of historic joinery, including historic windows, historic doors, historic shop fronts, etc. We'd be looking to engage more closely with the local community and embark on consultation meetings with them to identify where the first stage projects should come from. And then another really important one would be making sure that vegetation is controlled for the buildings. And that brings me to the second set of projects, which would be more medium term, which would include the restoration of derelict structures and buildings at risk in the area, and working with the local area offices, city architects and the Parks Department in terms of regeneration proposals. And then in terms of the long-term projects for the area, we'll be looking at adapting, reusing, future-proofing the buildings by supporting new uses in the buildings through the planning process. We'll be looking to establish a village design guide. We'll be looking to enhance the connection between built heritage and natural heritage through the local area plan and our development plan objectives, which we'll be looking at in the next year or so. And then we'll be looking at projects that could potentially regain access to the surviving parts of the mill race and the River Cammock. And that's it from me. I hope that was helpful. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Angela Rolfe and representatives from the Kilmainham Inchicore Network and Niall Boyle. I'd like to thank the Heritage Officer Charles Duggan, City Archaeologist Ruth Johnson and her assistant Louise Callan. I'd like to thank the Dublin Cultural Company, Iseult Dunn, Biodiversity Officer Kelly Mara, Local Area Office Representative Stephen Coyne, Sinead Wiley, Senior Executive Planner for the area, Ronan Fallon, Children's Laureate, Dervilia Roach, City Architect, Senior City Architect, Lindsay O'Sullivan, Architect from Parks Department, Christina Todd, Biodiversity Officer, Astrid Lynn, our Line Manager, Ronan Octon, and Garrod Carville and Fergal McNamara from 7L Architects. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Niamh. That was great. Now we're a little bit behind, but it's all still good. I do see a question in the chat about adding edibles such as salad leaves, fruit bushes, etc., to existing sites, supporting biodiversity. Any comments on that, Niamh or Deirdre? Have you any insights into that from some of your work?
It is really important. We didn't look at that specifically, but it is just a first stage broad strategic document. But certainly biodiversity is huge on the agenda with us, and at next stage we will be engaging quite regularly with the biodiversity officers in this regard. We know that with the new Planning and Development Act, there will be a much closer statutory relationship between built heritage and natural heritage. And our new development plan policies that we will be working on in-house will have to have that very, very strong relationship set out very clearly. So that is the statutory way that we can ensure that improving biodiversity within the actual gardens can be brought to bear, but also within the backland sites, and that we'd have to work with Parks Department on that. We haven't looked at it specifically, but we would be certainly very interested in how the individual owner or us, or the end user could enhance biodiversity in their own spaces. I hope that answers the question.
And then just to add that the Heritage Council, working with local authorities across the country, has just put biodiversity officers, a network of them, into local authorities throughout the island, or throughout Ireland South. And I would expect over the coming years that will start to have a positive impact in terms of biodiversity strategies and things like local authority projects and public realm. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Niamh.
Thank you.
Now, our next speaker is going to tell us about the beautiful town of Lismore and a former bank building. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Lindsay, yeah, Lindsay Camp,
Hi.
Executive Architect with Waterford County Council, going to tell us about the former Bank of Ireland building. Okay,
Yes.
Can you share your slides, Lindsay?
Yep.
We'll just cross our fingers.
Can you see that?
Yes, it's up there now. So if you just go into display mode,
Okay.
we'll be fine.
Yep. That's okay.
Brilliant. Thanks. Off you
Okay.
go.
Alrighty. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Ian, and thanks for having me here today. Yeah, I'm an executive architect working in economic development in Waterford City and County Council. And I'm going to talk about the former Bank of Ireland building in Lismore. So the project itself, I suppose it generated from an opportunity area that was highlighted in the 2020 Lismore Town Health Check, which was a need for tourist accommodation in the town. Its only hotel closed down, and the lack of accommodation has had a real impact on tourism in the town. The project is for self-catering accommodation, a tourist accommodation, so short-term, 2 or 3 days, utilizing both the garden and the building. The garden would have 5 glamping pods, but they were developed as 2 sort of separate projects. And then the building itself would have some self-catering tourist accommodation of the 3 apartments and 2 guest suites, and with access to a kitchen and dining area. So the project I'm talking about today in relation to the Historic Towns Initiative for 2025 is the building itself. Brief project history on, I suppose, the background of how this all came about was, as I previously mentioned, the Lismore Town Health Check. The lack of tourist accommodation was identified. And then in 2021, the Bank of Ireland closed many branches around the country, but they also closed Lismore. And the council recognised the potential that the building had, and used the building acquisition measure to purchase the building in 2022. In 2023, the Lismore Town Association was established. That was also off the back of the Lismore Town Health Check, and they've been really instrumental in getting the project going as well. And we've worked very closely with them throughout this process. In 2024, there were two Part 8s carried out. One was for the glamping pods, as I previously mentioned, in the rear garden, and the second Part 8 was for the tourist accommodation in the building itself. And sorry, finally, yes, in 2025, so this time last year, we applied for the Historic Towns Initiative grant for Phase 1 works to the building. Briefly, Lismore, if you know it, it's a town in West Waterford. It's a really picturesque heritage town, known for its castle, of course, but also the town itself is really beautiful and lovely setting. I don't know if you can see here on the image to the right or the map to the right, and it's that the town centre is an ACA. The bank itself, just located here to the western entrance of the town, is within the ACA. And it highlighted in blue are all the protected structures in the town centre that or NIAH listed buildings. So it really lends to the historic and heritage character of the town. The building itself is a former Bank of Ireland. It was the National Bank back in when it was built in approximately 1880. It is on the record of protected structures. It's an L-shaped building. The ground floor to the front part was used as a bank, and the ground floor to the rear as well. The first floor over the bank and the rear part of the building, first and second floors, were used as a dwelling for the bank manager for many, many years. And after 141 years operating as a bank, it closed down in 2021. But the living quarters had not been occupied since 1999. So that was a good about 25 years that it has been empty now. And you can really see the effects of that as well. Internally, you can see from these photos, the building was suffering from substantial water ingress, mostly from the roofs, but also from the walls. So the ceilings and covings were cracked in many places, and in some places, as you can see, it had actually fallen down. The walls in many areas were very damp, particularly here in the centre, you can see, and that's due to failed rainwater goods outside. Externally, we knew there were issues with the roof that needed to be dealt with, but of course, due to the height of the building, it's quite hard to ascertain the extent of it. We could tell, we had a survey done as well, or carried out, but once the conservation architect was appointed, Peter Blewett from Blewett O'Donoghue Architects, he advised us to get a drone survey of the roof carried out, which was great and made very clear the extent of some of the problems that we had, which were, there were hidden gutters, for example, which are notoriously problematic. Flashings, the chimneys pointing, that was missing or failing, ridge tiles or gaps between ridge tiles, parapet issues, broken roof slates or slipped roof slates. And then, as you can see to the right here, that's just an example of one of the windows. So almost all of the windows required repair. Some of them were actually okay, but very few. And then most lower sashes, the usual problems with windows, the lower sashes or the lower part of a sash were in poor condition. So we had to rationalize the project. As I mentioned, it was a project for, or it is a project for tourist accommodation, but we had to divide it into two phases because we knew we had to deal with making the building watertight first and foremost to prevent any further deterioration of the building fabric. So that was the aim of the dividing the works into two phases. And the scope of works for phase one was to repair the existing windows We did want to replace the inappropriate windows because there are some inappropriate PVC windows and doors, but since they're currently functional and watertight, we have left that out until phase 2. And with the roof, it is quite a large project, so re-roofing, but using the existing slates. And we have been able to retain a lot of the roof slates you'll see in a minute. The repair to lead flashings, repair and repoint parapets, repair and replace water goods, rainwater goods, and replace an existing roof window and install a new AOV over the stairwell in preparation for phase 2 works. And then phase 2 works hopefully in 2027, which will be all the internal works to actually turn it into tourist accommodation, new services, and the remaining external works and replacement of inappropriate windows and doors. Just on the timeline, so following the application process, we received notification of the grant in March 2025. And the HDI grant we received was for 200,000, and we had match funding, which was actually our match funding was increased from the original 20%, and we were provided with quite a bit more. So that really also helped, considering the price of works was a little bit more substantial than we had anticipated. I suppose the first lesson learned is that you can't start early enough if you do receive this grant. The timeline is very, very short. We tendered for the design team, and the design team, which is Blewett O'Donoghue Architects, Conservation Architects, were appointed in June. In this time, prior to the appointment of the design team, we procured some surveys like nesting bird and bat surveys, asbestos survey, and then because from previous buildings, we knew that it's quite difficult to get hold of good window or joiners for repairing historic windows. So we went out to, or it was decided that we'd go out to tender for the windows separately and concurrently to the tender for the design team. So they were lined up then in about June. The contractor for the roof works was appointed in September. Sorry, I forgot to mention that we had to obviously go out to tender for the roof works. The great thing about the design team is that with such an experienced conservation architect, they were able to get straight into it, and they mobilized very, very quickly to get a tender out, very clear and concise tender out for the roof works in July, the end of July. And then in August, we had our Heritage Week event. So we had good attendance at that, and it was just showing the building, what was planned for the building, but also some historic photos of the building. And people came chatting about what they remembered about the building. In September, the contractor for the roof works was appointed, and the works commenced at the end of September. November to December, the reinstallation of the windows happened, and in February 26, unfortunately, we've been somewhat delayed, and so the works are not quite complete, but they should be at the end of February. Hopefully, see what the weather does. Just on the tender for the roof works, the conservation architect put together a very robust set of documents. A lot of it was based on this very detailed drone survey of the roof that was carried out. And the works were very clearly set out, described and illustrated. So just have two examples here. And this really provided clarity to prospective tenderers. There were very few queries or questions from tenderers. So, and then even afterwards, it's been very, very clear to the contractor what essentially they need to do. So timeline, works underway. So the works got underway, as I mentioned, in September. First thing was to erect the a significant amount of scaffolding all around the building. And then the roof works. So the work started with the chimneys. So then after that, the scaffolding could be removed from the chimneys. Chimneys needed to be repointed, some cementitious render removed. The new LED counter flashings were installed on the left-hand side there. So that's not the most, there's another counter flashing that needs to be installed there. Both the conservation architect and Waterford City and County Council's conservation officer, Rose Ryle, have been very happy with the quality of the work carried out by the specialist lead contractors. So we've been very lucky in that way. There are a few weeks to go with the lead work. We've been a bit unfortunate with the wet weather, which has set the program back somewhat. So on the left-hand side, you can see that the parapet was repointed. All the roof slates were removed for sorting, storage, for reslating. They're really good slates, and we're fortunate that we should be able to retain approximately 80% of the slates. So that's looking pretty good. And they are sourcing similar size slates, which I think would be quite difficult to find because they're really, really large slates to complete or to replace the broken slates. On the right-hand side there, you can see the felting is in place. Really, really very wet weather. The last week, it's been very difficult to make any advances. The rainwater goods have also been removed for repair and redecoration, and they appear to be in good order, and about 80 to 90% of them should be able to be reused. So the works to the windows, as I mentioned, or most of the existing windows needed to be repaired. The National Gates and Joinery removed the windows for repair in August. They required more work than was initially anticipated. Some of them were in pretty poor condition. Most of the frames were okay. Some of the frames existing inside the building did need to be repaired as well. So these are just some photos from the workshop and on site. And most of the windows were reinstalled in November and December. There are 3 left to reinstall, but we're holding off for the moment until the roof is completely sealed and there's no further risk of leaks. As you can see here, there really is a variety of window shapes in the building, which is very interesting. So phase 2 works, not part of the Historic Towns Initiative grant, but just to give you an idea of what is to come. This will involve all the internal works to the building and the outstanding external elements that I mentioned. The building is to be developed as boutique style tourist accommodation. 3 self-catering apartments, which are mostly to the rear of the building, and then 2 guest suites over the former banking hall on the first floor. So that's here, which will have access to or they can use the kitchen and the dining hall below. Also, the people using the glamping pods in the rear garden can also can avail of the facilities of the communal dining and kitchen facilities. So we also hope that this apartment on the lower ground floor will be universal access. We do hope to be able to achieve that. The aim of the design of this layout was to work with the existing layout insofar as possible and to respect the historic fabric of the building. So regeneration outcomes. The project has been really well supported in the community. So the Lismore Town Association have been really active in promoting the importance of the project, and they really can't wait for it to get going. And they will be running the tourist accommodation in partnership with Waterford City and County Council. And it's really clear to all involved that there are a lot of really benefits for the town out of this. And this is just a list of some of the benefits that we feel will the effect of the project on the town. So first of all, most importantly, the Historic Towns Initiative has allowed the building to be safeguarded, the building's future to be safeguarded, and works carried out according to conservation best practice. It provides much needed tourist accommodation for the town. As I mentioned, there's no longer a hotel in the town. It will enhance the streetscape character and overall appearance of the architectural conservation area, and it will bring a bit of life back to the western part of the town, which is actually situated right opposite the library as well. It will also aid in promoting Lismore as a destination heritage town, and also for the wider Blackwater Valley area. It's very close to Cappoquin, and it's a really stunning area, stunning setting around Lismore. It'll provide a boost of economy to the town, providing local jobs, both direct and indirect, with additional visitors to the town. And it'll act as a catalyst, an example for further heritage-led regeneration projects in the town. So we hope that in 2026 there'll be a town centre first plan for Lismore carried out. And finally, just on lessons learned, just that we felt we learned from this project was certainly that the phased approach was definitely the right choice. I think, if we had tried to do the project in one go, that there would have been further loss and deterioration of building fabric. An experienced conservation architect with an in-depth understanding of the brief and constraints has really been invaluable. So and by constraints, I mean not just the building, but also of the time that we have to try and get this project over the line, and the ongoing community with the community's partners. So that's the Lismore Town Association, who've been really supportive, and the wider community have been following the works really closely, and they're very curious, and even standing outside the site, anybody passing by will say, "Oh, what's going on?" or "When it'll be finished." And finally, just with regard to if you're applying for the Historic Towns Initiative, that use any time you can to advance the project in whatever way you can, because it is a really tight timeline. For example, we use the time to advance other areas such as surveys and anything else that we could get done. The Lismore Town Association also facilitated us in some ways with clearing the site in some areas, and that was also very, very helpful. So again, that ongoing communication with the community partner is important, and set aside time for reporting as well. And thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. That was great. It's a wonderful project, and it was a pleasure to visit it before Christmas. I know it'll have a huge beneficial impact on the town of Lismore.
Yes.
Some great lessons there as well. There is a question there. There's two questions actually. The first was, can you phase applications? We have phased applications over multiple years through the HTI project, not on this one. But I will explain more of that when myself and Amanda do some slides just after our next presentation. And then the second one was, it was a question, how was phase 2 funded? You haven't moved to phase 2 on this project yet. I think you're still looking for funding. Am I correct in that?
We are still looking for funding. We were hoping to get TVRS, and we were not successful this year, unfortunately. However, we are going ahead with the detailed design of phase 2, fire cert application, etc. So Blewett O'Donoghue Architects will be getting into that soon once this phase 1 is complete. And then hopefully next year we may be successful in getting funding for that.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Lindsay.
Okay, thank you.
So our next speaker, hi Oisín, is Oisín Cray, Conservation Architect. And Oisín is speaking on behalf of Kerry County Council on the community-led rejuvenation of a county town, Castle Street in Tralee. So
very good. Thank you very much.
Great to
Well,
have
thanks.
you. Can you upload your slides, Oisin, please?
Yeah. Thanks for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here now. Just share my. Let me know when you see that.
We can see that.
Okay, very good. Well, I suppose this won't take too long. I might catch up on some of your time now as well, because I'm just going through a number of projects that were taken on this year or last year and completed on Castle Street in Tralee. So my role really has been working with the team led by Declan O'Malley and Sorcha Toomey and Virginia Tehan. Virginia had been on a bit of leave. She's the conservation officer along with Sorcha. So she's been on a bit of leave last year. So I took my role was simply to take on the list of candidates who were successful and guide them through the process of what was acceptable or otherwise, and try and help them along the way. So the projects, as I say, Castle Street, running down off, people are more familiar with, to the left side here in Tralee. This is just a little overview of the street. These are the projects that were identified. Now, I know Kerry County Council went through a number of kind of presentations to the local businesses. Castle Street is one that really needed a little bit of support. It's a trading street. It's a busy. It's effectively, it was originally the Earl of Desmond's 14th and 15th century castle in the centre of town. This was the street leading to the castle. It was demolished in the 1820s to make way for developments like Denny Street, as you see on the left, Denny Street. And so it's it's a little tired, and I suppose it's suffering not being the main street. There are a lot of businesses in the town that are empty up above and active down below. And it's a classic problem that's facing many, many towns around the country. So this sort of initiative is a really big help to try and boost people. It's a little bit of, as I was talking to Ian about the other day, it's a little bit of like the carrot and stick. It's a little bit of, some businesses need to be encouraged to either move on if they can't make it work, but there's a little bit of an incentive here to try and make it work for them. So good few engaged. So there's a spread of them here. As it happens, and I'll go through them, the one on the left there, they just couldn't get it together. The business is owned by the son of a local businessman who's actually overseas now, and he really wanted to do it. And I'm sure it'll happen again, but it just didn't really pull together. So a relatively small number of projects. So the projects are the buildings. You can see I don't know if you can see the outline, but there's an architecture conservation area on both sides of Denny Street. So there's one above and one below. So one building pops up in the lower one, and then of the NIH structures, a good few on the street, but actually only one of the buildings, these are the recorded monuments, and only one of the buildings on the street was identified in the NIH. So this is one of the values of an ACA picking up an area like this. While the buildings are not specifically identified as being extremely valuable, they are really important in terms of the streetscape and the value of retaining what was there. Again, you can see the character. I didn't do the overlays, but most of this street is in the second edition OS map. And again, the character of the street looking east, in this case, away from Denny Street behind you, the curve of the street, and the character of this, obviously some development gaps at the time. And then looking west towards Denny Street, this is more 1940s image. So very briefly, as I say, my role was literally to come in and take a person, this individual property here, for example. They got some funding towards doing some repairs to the facade, window repairs. The upper floors in this building are unoccupied at the moment. There is a hope to try and come up with a new use for them, and they're anxious to try and do something with it. Downstairs is an active little store, but you can see lots of little issues typical to most of these kind of scenarios. Not an extraordinary building, but very important again in the street. A lot of damage on the render, a lot of just kind of loose wiring and stuff like that. So the other challenge we had on this in Tralee this year was the uptake was a little slow. People were slow to engage. They had to do a second round again. So the projects all started very late. So there was a real scramble to try and get work done. But again, you can see the nature of just typical kind of deterioration, mostly probably caused by rainwater issues above, some older signage, electrics that have been added over the years and all the rest. So the work on this one, and again, as I say, I will fly through these because the work on this one, what happened was repairs to the render, tidying up a lot of these, gutters replaced, fascia board, windows restored upstairs, nothing on the lower level, but this element was taken on. In fairness to the contractors, done in a very tight timeline as well. They really rushed through this operation, and small little bit of tidy up left. But again, the existing windows were taken apart, taken out and restored and put back in again. jumping up the street then, the next one we had was even tighter, because right up to the very end, we didn't think they were going to pull it together to do anything with the building. But this corner site here, this is 3 of the sites in a row now. So there's the corner site here, then there's the one next door, which is the bar next door, and then Cashel Solicitors, the third one. So each of them got a bit of support towards doing various projects. In the case of the one here, it was really to try and do some restoration work on the windows, paint them up, some facade repairs. The building is vacant. They do have some plans for putting somebody back in again. So every bit of effort that we could make to try and make this place more presentable helped. This is it beforehand. Again, rainwater goods, the typical kind of issues associated with failing rainwater goods and the difficulty of accessing them and all the rest. A bit of a mixture of windows, but again, original windows or earlier windows. So we set about, in the very tight time, what was done here was just the windows were restored, the sashes taken out, draft beads, all the rest put in, fascia painted up, rainwater goods placed, and then down below was left as it is, and as much as possible in the time frame of a bit of a tidy up of the wiring. So I suppose what it does effectively is, in the broader sense, it makes this building more attractive for somebody to let and to lease, and it makes it weatherproof. It solves some of the immediate issues with the external elevation, which inevitably, I'm sure, will have impacts on the inside. So it's all good and all positive, and hopefully, I haven't heard since, but I think there's an active interest of a tenant to take the building on now as well, which is all good. Next door to that was the Blasket Bar, and interesting challenge of the Blasket Bar. The windows had been done in the past, as you can see, not terribly appropriate, but it wasn't part of the package in this case. It may be something worth looking at again. They were open to it, but the funding was really sought for works to the shop front. Now, again, it's another one of these classic dilemmas where it's not all original. There are elements of the original shop front retained. Bits and pieces have fallen off over the years. They've managed to save them. Quite a few changes to the window. So this was a classic one where they would have liked to make more modification to this, but it would have been a planning issue and it not necessarily a restoration of what was there. And it's a fine line between restoring a lot of recent changes and reinstating some of the older bits. But you can see some of the original corbels and details, and a lot of the capping, a lot of this would have been plywood, even although it's in its place. Other sections had fallen down. So again, just a little unsightly, apart from anything else, and all the problems of, again, cables being added over the years, lighting being, some of them defunct and just slightly neglected above. So the outcome in the end was reinstating the pieces that they found down below in their cellar, in their store, and put back together the shop front, and effectively replacing sections of damaged timber work and reinstating and a tidy up of the shop front. And they took it upon themselves as well to paint and do a bit of work up above, and all smartened up, and new. I think the shop front was the actual awning section of it was replaced as well. But it just gave a tidied up appearance, and again, relatively simple project in a very tight timeline. And then the next one, immediately next door, was Cashel Solicitors, and in this case, windows needed work. You can see the underside, not brilliant image there, of the underside of the fascia and the soffit, and that a little bit tired and neglected, and some rotten timbers. And again, just without getting into too much detail, there were lots of issues around the same sort of details of wiring running all along the thing, and a new shop front which had been installed down below. Literally just a matter of a bit of a tidy up around it, and that was left alone really. So it was, the works were up above principally, and then fixing render as well, patching, and rainwater goods replaced where you can see pieces have been left missing. So that's what came out of it in the end, is that repairs to the render. You can see on the right there the image that the sashes were of a much newer generation than the actual frames. The frames were all restored and repaired. Some of the sashes, which were more probably 20 years old, there was a replacement of some of those as well, because they just weren't, they were in very poor condition, just badly made in their time. So the windows are all back operational again, draft proofed, brushed, and all the rest. They, I think, even have this labels on the window in these photographs, and then the tidy up of the wiring and all the rest down below. So relatively painless and relatively quick, and all of these projects very, very speedy kind of rate of work, because of the fact they started so late. and I can see a little bit of tidy up painting to be finished between the lot. But it means that set of those 3 buildings is a lot tidier now and a lot smarter, and it's been a big help to them as well. This building is active on all the upper floors. They use it as their solicitors' offices, so it's permanently in use. The last of the projects, unfortunately, the one that up a little bit further up the road, was the one up towards Denny Street, and they just didn't get it together in time to move forward with the project, and they had hoped to take on works to the facade of this building. As you can see, even in this image, there are plenty of other buildings that really could do with some support, and they just didn't engage, unfortunately, for whatever reason. They didn't come in, and so it would be really nice. I mean, it's a fantastic initiative. It's a great project, and the team in Kerry County Council, I've done a little work with them before, previously on HDI up in Castle Island, where a tighter community, I suppose, and lots of people interested, and a lot of community chat meant that lots of people pulled in, and there was a lot of interest in the town. Here, very difficult for Kerry County Council just to encourage them along the way and get them to do something about it. So as you can see, the classic dilemma with an awful lot of these buildings being empty on the upper floors. So this kind of support certainly helps make it a little easier for them to maybe rent them and let them and come up with a plan. But it's part of the bigger picture, and it's part of our classic dilemma we all have to face together, I think. And so that's probably enough of an overview, really. As I say, it would have been lovely to have more of them engaged, but we did well to get through this lot in the time anyway. Thank you very much.
You, Oisin, now we have one question for you. What was the issue with the Blasket pub in terms of planning?
Planning.
Yeah, or was there an issue?
Well, I suppose just we had a property owner who thought this is a perfect opportunity for them to make some changes to the shop front. I think they had some ideas about opening up the shop front a little bit and maybe engaging. There wasn't a huge opposition in the council, but it was basically saying that would be fine, but it's not part of the restoration thing. You might come back again and talk about it, and we could look at it as a planning application. So there was no resistance. There was no big problem. It was just to say this package was principally about restoring the buildings, really. And if you've got a project, come back and talk to us about it again. So it could be modified relatively easily to do what they want to do, subject to planning again in future.
Okay, I see a question. Does Kerry County Council, Heritage Council, have a plan for 2026 to have empty units occupied at low rents by creatives? I'm not aware of that in Kerry County Council, and we don't have a.
I'm not aware of it in Kerry. I know there's looking at similar projects in Cork County, and I'm not aware of it in Kerry, but I think yeah, it's a fantastic way to temporarily use these properties and bring a bit of life into the market. As I say, I definitely feel the approach of a bit of support. And then if it's not working, and if people are just left their properties and it doesn't suit them to develop, then it's a little bit of encouragement more to get on with it.
Yeah, and we did produce a publication about 5 years ago on meanwhile use.
Yeah.
So I think you should be able to find that online.
Yeah.
Now I see another one. If the local authority doesn't have a conservation officer, is the work outsourced to a conservation architect for the streetscape facade element? Not always. I think we might have put that in as a grant condition in this particular case, just to help the local authority. You must have said something about Cork County, Oisin. Where in Cork County?
Yeah, I've just been working on a Thrive project in Clonakilty, a heritage-led generation project, and there are certain buildings there now which there are groups now actively bidding to take on some of the buildings in Clonakilty as a kind of a meanwhile use. And that's kind of ongoing at the moment. So, and I know there have been similar projects in Cork.
Brilliant. And you seem to be getting all the questions today, Oisin. Interested to understand whether you experience many challenges working with property owners who are unwilling to engage.
Well, I suppose my role really has been, after the challenging stuff has been done by Virginia and Circa, the applications are made and people come along. Once they've engaged, then it's when I meet them. And at that point, it's a pleasure to work with them. We're on the same page.
Yeah, I think what we've noticed on projects like this is that there's a lot of time building relationships and just making connections with building owners. That does take time. The local authority is normally pretty well placed to do that through local area offices and just ACOs, architectural conservation officers, doing work in ACAs and with building owners. And that always helps. That always helps build that relationship. So thank you, Oisin. That was brilliant. So next up is Amanda Ryan, my colleague, grants officer, and myself, and we're going to talk you're there, Amanda. Great. We're going to talk about the HTI scheme and just give a quick run through how it works and what we're looking for. Just bear with me while I upload some slides. Okay, you should be able to see that. Hang on. Okay, I've just lost my slides. I need to adjust the view. Okay. So the idea of this presentation, these slides, is that we just give a quick run through the criteria and the working of this scheme.
They're appearing fine for us now, Ian. We can see your full screen, but
okay, it's not moving. And my slides aren't moving for some strange reason. Okay, we just stop share and we'll do it again. Okay, I leave it out of speaker view. We'll see if that makes any difference. Okay, so it should be moving now.
Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. So you've heard a whole series of projects from earlier today from 2025. And you should have gotten a flavour by now that it's really about the strength of local communities and businesses supported by local and national government, aimed at improving the quality of life for a given town. So we've been doing this scheme since 2018. In 2026, the aim again is to provide support to historic towns engaged in a programme of heritage-led regeneration. So this year we've a total fund of 2 million. Now, I suppose the key point is the deadline is the 20th of February. So that's 5 p.m. The other projects you didn't hear about this year. From 2025, we funded a number of other projects. So the former courthouse top left in Ballymote, County Sligo. St. Peter's Church, Castletownbere, or former church, deconsecrated. Cork County Council for use as a community hall. And then we also funded window repair works and some other buildings in Ballina, window repairs at the Jackie Clark Collection in Ballina Town Centre. Then as well as that, we works in Strokestown, County Roscommon. So anything I'm going to say now is based on the Historic Towns Initiative booklet, which is available on our website, and that's really the Bible if you're making an application. That tells you all you need to know. So the idea is a small number of towns or small number of projects in 2026. You make your application to us on the Heritage Council's online system. It's assessed by National Steering Group. So that's essentially the Heritage Council, our colleagues from the Department of Housing, the Built Heritage Service, and we generally have an external person, normally from Fáilte, Ireland. So what we like to see are applications that are plan-led. So there's a management plan, a HTI plan, similar to what you saw from Greystones or Inchicore earlier today, or others, or a conservation plan, a public realm plan. It might be a town centre health check plan, it might be a town centre first plan, but it's nice to see a kind of a planned framework. Now, you also heard about Stream 1 and Stream 2 projects. So Stream 1 was what you heard about in terms of Tralee or Lismore. Stream 2 were the plans. So that's what you heard about from Inchicore and Greystones. So you can apply for Stream 1 or Stream 2 projects, and there's no limit on the number of projects you can apply for or that your local authority can apply for. So In terms of 2026, as in previous years, we expect local authorities will work with a range of partners. Evidence of such partners, letters of support, that's always good to see. Funding, the region of 150 to 350,000. Try achieve those aims within 2026. We're still stuck on we operate within a calendar financial year, so that's January to December. Projects funded under the HTI should show strong public engagement, so e.g. Heritage Week event. What towns are eligible? I don't think we ever said a town isn't eligible in the length of time we've been running this scheme. So possess significant cultural heritage assets, distinctive sense of place, can be anything from a medieval foundation, plantation towns, estate towns, those established around local industries. Now, this is a change this year. Urban centres designated as special regeneration areas under the Living City initiative are not eligible to apply. Now, we've always had that condition, but now that area includes areas within Dublin, Galway, Cork, Kilkenny, Waterford, Limerick, Tipperary. But what we've seen this year is the recent addition of Athlone, Sligo, Drogheda, Dundalk, and Letterkenny. So what that means is that building owners in those areas can apply for tax relief, tax incentive for works involving historic buildings. However, we will consider projects involving publicly owned buildings in these areas. So it might be buildings or projects in a local authority ownership, or a market hall, or the Bank of Ireland building that you saw in Lismore, and those kinds of buildings. So what we're saying there is, in those towns listed that are included in the Living Cities initiative, we're reluctant to fund. We're not deeming it eligible that we would fund private building owners, because there are tax incentives available under that particular scheme. So what we will do then is we will consider publicly owned buildings which cannot benefit under the Living Cities initiative. So Stream 1 this year, seeking proposals for capital works to repair and enhance the heritage of the town through heritage-led regeneration. And that's really the lens that we see this scheme through, heritage-led regeneration, designed, implemented by the local authorities, obviously working in partnership. Projects which work in an architectural conservation area should promote this designation. We like to see those. Projects that encourage private owners and their occupiers to invest in appropriate conservation-led works and repairs, address dereliction, much like you saw in Tralee, the conservation of landmark buildings, like you saw in Lismore, streetscape maintenance, conservation projects, conservation-led public groundworks. They're all things we like to see. Key detail, match funding of 20% is required from the local authority or owners. Now, we had a question on phasing then as well. Complex and ambitious proposals, so streetscape-wide projects involving multiple building owners, which encourage private owners and occupiers to invest in conservation-led works and repairs, can be phased over 2 years. So that's 2026 and 2027. So if you're applying for that, we'd like to see a budget breakdown. Obviously, the key is an award of 350 in total per town over those 2 years. So it's not 350 each year, it's 350 in total. Under Stream 2, no changes in this. We will support applications to deliver a heritage-led regeneration plan. We'll award up to 50,000 for that, and then we are seeking match funding of 20% for that as well. And you can apply for projects in both streams. There's no limit on the number of projects a local authority can apply for. In terms of how we assess these, your application should set out the significance of the town and its heritage, any relevant policies and objectives in the county development plan or local area plan, details of your track record to date in heritage-led regeneration, the involvement of the heritage staff in the local authority, and then the vision of the town set out in any relevant management plan, conservation plan, public ground plan, etc., and how this project or proposal would sit within that. How it would be funded under the HTI, how it would promote heritage-led regeneration, what kind of partnerships are there. So is there a residence community group involved? Is the Chamber of Commerce involved? Then the extent of match funding and contribution in kind proposed, and then just the leadership. Who's going to drive the project? Who do we talk to on this? So it's always good to have a person you can call. And then the assessment criteria. This is what we mark and score every application under. So the extent to which private owners and occupiers or community groups will address dereliction and promote appropriate maintenance, 30%. The town's track record to date in heritage-led regeneration. Will it make a contribution to heritage-led regeneration of the town, 20%? The quality of the projects proposed, 20%. Climate change, how will it build resilience in the historic built environment? So that's 15%. So really what we're looking for there is keeping buildings in use, making sure that the carbon that's embodied in them is maintained. Windows upgrades, roof upgrades, making sure chimneys aren't letting in water, and just keeping built heritage, building stock in use and in a presentable condition. And then 15% the presence of a vibrant and engaged community. So how we'd normally see that is letters of support, involvement of a town team, things like that. So that's the criteria. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Amanda Ryan. Are you there, Amanda?
I am, Ian, thank you.
Right, off you go. You tell me when to move your slides on.
Oh, yeah, is that okay, Ian?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody, and thank you. I won't take too long. Ian has covered quite an amount of information about the scheme and how we assess applications. So I'll just go through a few housekeeping issues. So basically, our online system was introduced for HTI applicants last year. So if you haven't used it before, you will need to register. Now, we have all local authorities set up on the system, but as a contact, you'll have to register your name. So once you log on, the portal is available on the funding page of our website. So you go there, you click register. Next slide, Ian, please. And you search for your local authority under the organisations tab. Once you submit your contact details, you should get an automatic email within a few minutes, really, to invite you to set up a password. Now, there are issues with firewalls and security settings with most local authorities. So what I would suggest, if you don't get that email almost instantly, that you contact us at grants@heritagecouncil.ie, and we will issue you with a temporary email or temporary password straight away to get you onto the system. Next slide, please, Ian. So once you get that email, you can log on and you will be prompted to revise your password to your preferred option. You then choose under current schemes the HTI application form. Now, just a few words about the system. It is a live system, so to avoid losing any work, do save frequently. I would also suggest that if you haven't registered or used the system before, that you do, if you are intent on applying, that you do so almost after this meeting, just to get yourself onto the system and see the application form and get started. I'd suggest that you start preparing early. I think our other presenters also said that. If you have documents to upload, that you upload them as quickly as possible. They will have to be in PDF format, labeled clearly and less than 10 megabytes each. Next slide, please, Ian. Sorry, 1 second. So I would say this bit of advice I give at all presentations, no matter who the grantees are, but please read the guidelines carefully. This information booklet gives all the critical details about eligibility, assessment criteria, match funding, timelines, required information. So do make sure you spend a bit of time looking at the guidelines. Demonstrate your match funding. That has to be monetary contribution, not services in kind or internal costs. And make sure that you show this clearly on the budget table. Address, when you're doing your application, address each of the 5 assessment criteria directly. Write your application from the perspective of the assessor. Show clearly, how you hit heritage significance, your project quality, track record, community engagement, climate resilience. The assessors can only score on what's submitted, so they may not have prior knowledge, so don't make any assumptions. Clarity, completeness, quality of information strongly influence scores. So if you think something's important, upload an additional document. The costings are important. Make sure that you have evidence to support the cost that you've got. Ideally, this would be through clear methodologies with figures, also through quotations or estimates. Next slide, please, Ian. Just a little bit about the supporting documentation. Again, make sure they're in PDF format, less than 10 megabytes each. Include supporting information that strengthens your case and provides clear evidence of need. And you can do that through photographs. Assessors absolutely love photographs, surveys, condition details to demonstrate urgency and your heritage value. Some of those could be conservation methodologies, technical documents, maps that show the project location, letters of support. Ian has touched on those. They are really vital, and the more you have, the better in terms of showing community support, local partners, businesses, things like that. Plan surveys also, or audits. Also, in regards to permissions, make sure that there's a whole section on permissions or a whole tab, and make sure that you click it correctly. A lot of people, not a lot of people, but we have incidents where applicants rush through that section because it's a tick box section. So if we're dealing with protected structures or anything like that, that you do tick the right box. If you haven't got permissions in place, that you have considered them, that they're being applied for, and please provide evidence of that. Just a word on managing onward funding to private owners. We do need to see that you have a clear process and governance in place. So if you are considering providing funding to private building owners, you will need to show us how you've considered the buildings, that there's a clear process there for the selection, what criteria was used, how you're going to, if the grant is successful, how you are going to put in place a process for administering the funds afterwards. Have you considered VAT? And also what legal requirements or terms and conditions you will have in place. So you do need to think about that. That is one of the issues that arises yearly in terms of drawdown of funding, that we have to ensure that this onward funding has been managed correctly. So if you're considering that, do have a clear process and governance in place to address it. The next slide, I believe, is the last slide. And I would say that if you're having any technical issues whatsoever, do reach out to us sooner rather than later, especially on the last day. Traffic is going to be a lot more than normal. So instead of kind of trying to figure something out, do send us an email. We will be there to support you. And we probably can figure it out within a few minutes, whereas you could be trying to get it sorted and wasting critical time. The system will shut down automatically at 5 p.m. So as others have said, and I strongly advise, start early, get your uploads attached as quickly as possible. And the best of luck with your application. And if you have any questions, do reach out to us. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Amanda. Now, I see we have a couple of questions. Has the webinar been recorded? Yes, I just need to agree, make sure everybody's happy for it to be shared. So we will share that afterwards, subject to that. For living cities, can public realm projects be funded under HTI? Yes. Can I confirm that if a local authority is not in the living cities category, that can apply for funding for one-off buildings? Yes, is the answer to that. If it's a local authority ownership, yes. Under stream 2, cost. Yes. So that question is, under stream 2, could the HTI support preparatory early stage costs associated with the repurposing of vacant heritage buildings? Yes, we'd be interested in looking at that. If it was to tee up an application the following year for actual works or another application for a different funding pot to bring a building back into use, yes. Ian, you outlined that HTI is for a small number of products. How many did you fund last year? We funded off the top of my head, about a dozen projects last year. So with a range of funding amounts, so a couple of plans and a couple of large capital projects. The second part of your question, there's no limited number of projects an authority can apply for. I think the issue there is the capacity of the local authority. Can they deliver a number of projects? And it is competitive. When our grants announced, closing date is 20th of March. We'll be getting grants out, the awards in early March. And then you have until late November to do the works. Yeah, thanks, Owen. And then thanks everybody for putting your time into preparing good slides. Yes, I'd echo that. Thank you to Virginia Teehan, Sarah Waters, Deirdre Burns, Gavin Campbell, Niamh Kiernan, Lindsay Camp, Oisin Cray, and then Amanda as well. I don't think we have any more questions. Anything any of our panelists want to add? No. I think we're good. So then, listen, thanks everybody. And 20th of February, do drop us a line if you have any questions or queries in the meantime, and we'll do our best to help. And best of luck. Thank you.